Good afternoon to all of you. So this is our class on biochemistry. Here in unit number 3, so carbohydrate metabolism. This is the topic which we are going to discuss today. Okay, so here I have divided carbohydrate metabolism and its entire discussion into 3 lectures. So in the preliminary lecture, what we will see is discussion regarding digestion, absorption and glucose homeostasis. So these are the 3 things which we can consider as a foundation for understanding carbohydrate metabolism. So let's spend some time on learning about all these 3 things, and then we'll go to the next parts of the carbohydrate metabolism, like the cycles that we have, like glycolysis, Krebs cycle, etc. Okay. So here in this lecture session, we will see carbohydrate chemistry and classification, processing of food and its significance, digestion of carbohydrates, absorption of glucose, the various mechanisms that are established over there, and glucose homeostasis. So these are the things which I consider as foundations to understand the way how carbohydrates are assimilated into your body. Every one of these parts have some kind of significance in deciding whether somebody is healthy or diseased. Okay, so that's why we need to have a good idea on all these 3. So let's see the chemistry of carbohydrates and a little bit of information regarding classification, because this information helps you understand the way how food is digested in our body, and is there any role of chemistry is there in deciding which food we are consuming, which foods we cannot consume. So carbohydrates are polyhydric aldehydes or ketones with general formula CH2O n times. Okay, so means hydrated carbon. So this kind of definition you might have already heard about this one in your organic chemistry. So here basically carbohydrates can be segregated into 3 parts. One is simple carbohydrates, where simple carbohydrates, they contain only simple sugars like monosaccharides, disaccharides, and a few parts of polysaccharides, where linear polysaccharides are there. And in complex polysaccharides, you will find branched chain carbohydrates and carbohydrates with other than sugar entities. Okay, because in case of sugar we are supposed to have only carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. Sometimes these sugars are substituted with other atoms like sulfur and nitrogen. So those type of compounds are what we call them as complex carbohydrates. In conjugated carbohydrates, we find carbohydrates conjugated with other classes of molecules like lipids and proteins, like glycolipids, glycoproteins. So these are the terms which you will hear in the further lectures in biochemistry. Okay, so here in simple sugars, they can be monosaccharides, disaccharides, etc., depending upon the number of sugars, or simple sugars which upon hydrolysis gives monosaccharides. Okay, so let's say if you take starch and if you hydrolyze it, obviously you will be getting glucose. And let's see in brief regarding chemistry of glucose and a few aspects regarding its chemistry. So this is glucose. Glucose is a hexose where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons are there, and 5 hydroxy groups and 1 aldehyde group is there. And because of these many functional groups, glucose is considered as one of the very highly reactive chemical as far as our biochemistry is concerned. In our biochemical environment, glucose is one of the highly reactive chemical. And if you see its chemistry, glucose contains reactive functional groups like nucleophiles like OH groups and aldehyde carbonyl present on the same structure. Hence intramolecular reactions are possible, where the hydroxy group over here may react with aldehyde carbonyl carbon, because here you will have because carbonyl carbon is permanently polarized, so here you will have delta plus charge, here you will have delta minus charge. So that's why the hydroxy group can attack carbonyl carbon, so thereby you will get this kind of ring structure. This is what we call it as pyranose structure. Pyra structure is a 6-membered ring containing oxygen as a heteroatom. So this is a pyranose structure. Here, very important thing is, this is an addition elimination type of reaction. Here it is adding across the double bond O. So when addition is generating a chiral carbon. See here, this carbon, the first carbon is actually chiral because we have connection with one O, carbon, oxygen, and then from here you will have a hydrogen. So that's why this is a chiral carbon. So when addition reaction is generating a chiral carbon, there is always a possibility that you will get an enantiomeric mixture. So here, if you see the orientations of hydroxy groups, if the OH group is on the towards the downside, okay, so or axial side, and this is the equatorial side. Axial side, we call it as alpha glucose. If the OH is coming upwards, is represented as coming upwards, this glucose is what we call it as a beta glucose. Okay, so this is what we need to see for the in the first sign. And then in nature glucose is available, okay, but glucose is available mostly as a disaccharide, trisaccharide or polysaccharide. So when two sugar units are joined together, they are joined together via an ether bond. So here this is an ether bond. So when ether bonds are there, two types of ether bonds are possible. One is between the hydroxy groups like this, and when two such units are connected via a bond where the entire bond is protruding outside or the entire bond is protruding downwards. Okay, so in this type of connection, what will happen is, we call the first one as so this one downwards as alpha glycosidic linkage, and this one we call it as beta glycosidic linkage. Please remember the notations and the way how we are naming the bonds, okay, because they help us understand a few more things regarding biochemistry or digestion of carbohydrates. So here let's see in case of starch, because this is a very simple molecule and you already have some idea on that, so that's why I'm just going ahead. So if you consider this as a sugar unit, all the sugar units are linearly connected in this manner in case of starch. So this is the first carbon, 1, 2, 3, and this is the fourth carbon. So 1,4 glycosidic linkages will be there. Okay, through 1,4 glycosidic linkages, if the molecule is connected, this type of arrangement you can see in starch. And starch contains two types of chemicals. One is amylose. So this is amylose. And we do have one more molecule, that is what we call it as amylopectin. So in amylopectin, the only difference is you have the same kind of structure as 1,4 linkage will be there. A slight branching will be there. Slight branching through 1,6. Okay, because here you have the 6th carbon is there. So this is first carbon, this is 4th carbon, this is 6th carbon. So this is what we call it as 1,4 glycosidic linkage through what? So this linear polysaccharide is built, and then from here you will have a branching. So this branching is what we call it as 1,6 linkage. So like this you will have amylose and amylopectin. Amylose goes freely into water, but amylopectin creates that insoluble jelly-like environment comes because of amylopectin. So here what type of bonding is this one? Because oxygen or the ether linkage is going downwards, means this is what we call it as alpha glycosidic linkage. And we do have one more polysaccharide prominently present, widely available in nature. So that is what we call it as this one. Okay, so this is what we call it as cellulose, where you will have sugar units connected to each other via 1,4 linkage only. But if you closely observe, the glycosidic linkage is actually protruding outside. Protruding outside means it is actually a beta glycosidic linkage. So why are we discussing about alpha glycosidic and beta glycosidic linkage? Because the food material, whatever we are going to consume, usually in food, are in one or the other way starchy material. Okay, so starch is a very big macromolecule which we cannot digest, we cannot absorb. Sorry, we cannot absorb. But here, what is needed is absorption is the ultimate objective. That's why to facilitate, because the big molecule is supposed to be broken down into smaller pieces with the help of an enzyme. That is what we call it as amylose enzyme. Okay, so an amylose enzyme will be there, which is a hydrolase enzyme. So that can recognize, our amylase recognize only alpha glycosidic linkase but not beta glycosidic linkages. So that's why cellulose or fibrous material cannot be absorbed, cannot be digested by our body. Okay, so our amylase enzyme can recognize only alpha glucosidic linkages but not beta glycosidic linkages. But animals which are grazing on grass, okay, so they can digest them because they contain beta amylose, so beta amylase enzyme. Beta amylase enzyme is available in their stomach and as well as saliva. So that's the reason why all the animals which eat grass or otherwise that material, cellulosic material, can digest because they contain beta amylase enzyme. We have only alpha amylase. Okay, because amylase will have some certain rate of reaction. Okay, amylase is an enzyme, so it's a catalyst. All catalysts, when performing certain biochemical reaction, they will have a rate of reaction. Okay, so rate of reaction means what? So per minute, these many moles of starting material can be converted to ending material. But here, as you can see, large molecules are there. Enzymes cannot degrade the bigger molecules quickly. So that's the reason why to facilitate that, we go for cooking. Okay, so how do we cook? We cook by adding water and boiling it. Okay, we are adding water and then we are heating it. We are supplying heat also. So what type of reactions are possible here? Hydrolytic reactions are possible, where this big molecule will be cut down into smaller pieces, so thereby our enzymes can easily access all these glucose units and then they can quickly degrade them, so that before food leaves small intestine, okay, because the gastric emptying time is there, so before that time our digestion process is over and then absorption process is also over. So what is the reason behind stomach ache? Because people suffer from stomach ache when they eat certain raw food. So in while looking at the digestive tract, I'll explain you all those things. Okay, so friends, so this is what is starch and this is cellulose. This is the relation between stereochemical or chemistry of glycosidic bond and the way how our system is tuned to digest starch and not cellulose. So let's go ahead. In digestion, okay, so let's see the process of treating a substance with heat, enzymes or a solvent to promote decomposition or extract essential components is literally what is meant by digestion. Okay, so in our body, how actually digestion process happens? So this is gastrointestinal tract. Starting from mouth, it will go to stomach and then it will go to small intestine, then it will go to large intestine and to the end. And here we do have two important parts. One is liver and then here this is gallbladder. You will also have here pancreas is one more part is missing over here, but pancreas will also be there. So here stomach, basically from mouth we eat the food, and the stomach is like a big reaction vessel where food is mixed with various chemicals and then it will slowly go to small intestine where the contents of liver and gallbladder, so they are and then the pancreas, so they are mixed with the food material, and then in the small intestine actual digestion process happens. Okay, so this is it. Now let's see one by one. So we start discussing about digestion of carbohydrates starting from mouth. So in mouth what happens? One is chewing mechanically degrades the food material. So whatever cooked food that you have to chew it. So chewing also helps mix food with saliva. Saliva is the chemical here which contains the enzyme amylase enzyme. The saliva contains amylase as well as lipase. So these are the two enzymes which will be there in saliva. So what it does, salivary amylase converts starch into dextrins. Okay, because amylase is a hydrolase enzyme, so it hydrolyzes the ether bonds over here and converts them to dextrins. What are dextrins? Dextrins are polysaccharide, the sugar polymers only. They contain 6 to 8 sugar units will be there connected to each other. So that is what we call it as a dextrin. It can go up to 12 sugar units also. Okay, so these dextrins will be converted to maltose. So two glucose units joined together. So this is what we call it as maltose. Okay, so dextrins will be converted to maltose in in oral cavity during chewing process. Because your carbohydrate is mixed very well with saliva which contains enzymes, so that will degrade the bigger polymers first into smaller polymers, so thereby dextrins are formed. So these are dextrins. Dextrins will be further hydrolyzed by the same enzyme into maltose enzyme. So this is the reason why whenever you take any type of starchy material, in the beginning it tastes like bland taste will be there, but later on as you keep on chewing it, the hydrolytic process ultimately gives you maltose, which is relatively sweet in taste. Okay. Next one is in the digestion process we have stomach. In the stomach is like a big reaction vessel, like a round bottom flask. So here you will have specialized cells, cellular arrangements will be there. All these arrangements are secretive, means some juices are secreted. So here in this lining you will have parietal cell and a chief cell. Parietal cells actually are specialized cells which secrete protons or otherwise hydrochloric acid into the environment. What is its job as far as carbohydrate chemistry is concerned? It maintains acidic pH. Acidic pH is necessary for activating certain enzymes. Okay, digestive enzymes are actually secreted, especially in protein digestion as well as lipid digestion. We will see all these things. So for enzymes, optimal pH, optimal temperature is needed. So this acidic pH helps digest the carbohydrates efficiently. The next one is the acid has a dual role to play here because it kills microbes, virtually sanitizes whatever you are eating. Okay, except there are a few microbes are there which actually causes ulcers. Then regarding digestive juices, because here you can see that is about stomach, and after stomach you will have duodenum. Into the duodenal part you will see the contents, the synthesized molecules from liver, gallbladder as well as pancreatic tissue. The contents from all these are released into duodenal region. So the food material that is coming from stomach mixed with acid, that is what we call it as acid chyme. So this will mix with the juices that are coming from all these. Especially from pancreas, you will get an enzyme, we call it as pancreatic amylase. Just like salivary amylase, we will also have one enzyme, pancreatic amylase from pancreas. What it does, it will hydrolyze the partially hydrolyzed starch molecules, dextrins as well as maltose into glucose. Okay, pancreatic amylase converts starch to maltose and glucose. Glucose is absorbed in the first 1/3 of the small intestine. Glucose is absorbed in the first 1/3 of the small intestine. Let's see the structure of a small intestine. Let's see a little bit, because this is the small intestinal lumen. Okay, so if you see the lining, over here, so it contains specialized cells, like these are all folds. Okay, these are all more like folds. So the epithelial cell over here, if you see each one of the cell, they contain rough finger-like borders will be there. We call them as microvilli. So because of these so many folds that we have, okay, here folds are there, and again here folds are there, and here also so many folds are there to the cell membrane. So these microvilli are what we call them as finger-like projections. They increase surface area several times. So thereby they come in contact, maximum contact can be maintained between food and the cell membrane. It enhances area of exposure, and then it helps in absorption process. Okay, small intestine is the major organ for absorption of food material that we ingest, digested food material that we had taken. Okay, is it clear? Okay, good. So from here we'll move ahead. Now let's see, in case of glucose, how absorption process happens in case of glucose. It's not only glucose, you take any chemical. So when it is crossing a membrane to enter into your system, because your system is like a sealed entity, it is completely sealed with different types of membranes. So whenever a chemical has to enter into your system, it has to cross certain borders. So we have cell membrane. So cell membrane has to be crossed. Because all these chemicals are essential for our body, we have specialized mechanisms for absorption. Okay. So here sometimes the chemical can be taken inside easily. Means let's say if this is the membrane that we have, chemical has to cross. So it can cross directly via like diffusion, or sometimes you take help of some kind of a channel. Okay, it's like sodium channel, chloride channel, like that, so that ions can move. Or sometimes you can have specialized mechanisms, we call them as transporters, where they pick up the chemical and then they will release the chemical. It is like this. So this is what we call it as transporter type of mechanism. So these are the mechanisms. So this is more like facilitated type of transport, this is channel type of transport, this is diffusion type of transport, which obeys concentration gradient. Okay, so all these mechanisms, some of the super specialized mechanisms are also available. So here, in case of absorption of glucose, we have a specialized mechanism, we call them as glucose transporters are there. I'll show you a few animations. So it is like this is the protein, and we have this cell membrane, and when you these proteins are flexible, semi-flexible, where they keep on opening. Okay, and they have an area within the protein, a space that is meant for specific chemicals. So in this case, the protein has a space that is accessible to glucose, and it can open from outside as well as inside. So when it is opening from outside, it is opening the channel for the outside world. Here it is sealed, and in this case here it is sealed. So it is like this. So this is the kind of mechanism you will see in case of glucose transporter. Let's see again. So here this is opening, and now this is stomach lumen where glucose units are there, and then glucose enters into the channel. Now glucose is trapped. Okay, so once the glucose is trapped, it will open from the other side. So thereby glucose escapes into the blood. Okay, so this is outside, this is okay, this is outside, this is inside, means this is lumen, small intestinal lumen, small intestine lumen, and this is blood compartment. Okay, glucose is absorbed directly into blood. Okay friends, this is the way how actually glucose is absorbed across the membrane. This is the basic mechanism. And what actually makes this protein to respond actually decides the type of mechanism that we have that controls the glucose absorption. So here different mechanisms are there. See here, so first one is sodium dependent glucose transporter mechanism, where sodium and glucose, those two has to do something what we call it as a symport mechanism, because here sodium concentration outside, this is outside, means stomach lumen or the intestinal lumen, this is the blood compartment. Here low sodium will be there, here high sodium will be there. Okay, high sodium will be there. So from high concentration to low concentration, sodium is moving downhill. So this is actually leveraged in taking in glucose. Okay, taking in glucose. So this mechanism is what we call it as symport type of mechanism. So this is the reason why whenever you are eating, please see that you are also consuming sodium chloride with it. Otherwise glucose cannot be absorbed across the stomach lumen. So that's the problem. The next one is GLUT1, glucose transporter system 1. This is more like facilitated diffusion, where there is no influence of insulin is there. In facilitated diffusion, the way how I have shown you earlier in the earlier cases, where the protein opens up in the beginning to the outside world where glucose is there, and then it will trap glucose inside and then it will release it into the blood compartment. So this type of mechanism you will see in case of pancreatic beta cells as well as hepatocytes. Okay, so in pancreatic beta cells they actually work like a glucometer, okay, glucose sensor, because it will sense glucose which is obtained via GLUT1 receptor mechanism, where there is no energy needed, no symport, nothing is needed. And GLUT2 is also there in pancreatic beta cells and intestinal epithelium as well as in kidney. It is also facilitated diffusion, no insulin is needed. And GLUT3, these receptors are present in CNS. It is also facilitated diffusion only. Very high affinity you will find in glucose, for glucose, because the amount of glucose that you are consuming per day, more than 50% is needed is utilized by your brain and nerve tissue only, because it extracts or it gains a lot of energy exclusively via glycolysis reaction. Okay, so that's the reason why CNS needs is highly dependent on glucose. The last one, but very very important one, is GLUT4. GLUT4 is a very important mechanism where it is controlled by insulin. It is controlled by insulin. So I have one slide dedicated for that. There I will explain you why it is so special. GLUT4 is present on skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle and adipose tissue. Skeletal and cardiac muscle both are striated muscles only. Cardiac muscle is striated smooth muscle, skeletal muscle is actually skeletal muscle, because these two work on they respond to insulin, thereby they absorb glucose. Here also it is facilitated diffusion only. And like this, these are only examples, but in many other tissues all the receptors are distributed. There are about 20 different types of glucose transporters are there, which can be segregated into these 4 categories. Okay, so let's see in brief. Okay, so in case of intestinal cell, you will have GLUT2 receptor, GLUT5 receptor and SGLT, sodium dependent glucose transporter system is also there. In SGLT you will also find so many numbers, but you just don't bother about them. But the mechanism is glucose and sodium symport mechanism. Both will come inside simultaneously. This GLUT5 is a specialized receptor exclusively. It helps in absorbing fructose and other organic compounds. It is not meant for actually glucose. GLUT2 helps in absorption of glucose. Okay. In hepatocytes, as I told you, GLUT2 receptor is there, a facilitated diffusion type of mechanism. Here glucose and fructose are coming inside, and GLUT9 has a different type of mechanism where urea and fructose exchange with each other. Okay, so hepatocyte, the glucose that is taken inside the hepatocyte will go either towards glycolysis and energy formation or glycogen formation. And in kidney, as you knew, because in kidney, once the glomerular filtration part is over, I presume that you have gone through kidney chapter in your first year B.Pharm C, maybe in anatomy and physiology. Kidney, in the first part in glomerular filtration, except proteins and cells, all the remaining chemicals are filtered out. So in the preliminary filtrate that is obtained, so much of useful material will be there. From there, water, glucose and other useful material is to be reabsorbed. So in the reabsorption in kidney, glucose is reabsorbed by SGL2, means sodium dependent glucose transporter system, where sodium and glucose both will be absorbed in the proximal convoluted tubule. In proximal straight tubule, one more next part, you will have SGLT1, and in proximal tubule, in the further, you will have GLUT9B and the remaining chemicals. Here this GLUT9B can work both for urate as well as glucose. So this is actually a question mark, but please remember that in kidneys you will have sodium dependent glucose transporter system, that is a reabsorption of glucose. This is very important. In pancreatic beta cell you will have GLUT2 and GLUT1 receptors are there. So this here, upon absorption of glucose, it alters the oxidation reduction potential within the cell. So thereby it activates, because beyond certain level it activates release of insulin into the blood cell, blood circulation. Okay, so this is the way how glucose absorption happens in case of pancreatic beta cell. In pancreatic beta cell, because in case of insulin dependent transmission, how actually it works, please don't be horrified by just looking at all the entire mechanism. I'll just simplify this one, maybe it helps you, that's why I have kept it. In case of GLUT4, it is so unique that you will not have any kind of receptor. Normally you will not find any kind of receptor on the cell surface. Only receptor that you will find is insulin receptor. Okay, so when insulin type of GLUT4 type of receptors, where they will be, one is skeletal muscle cells, okay, and the second one is skeletal muscle, second one is liver. So these are the two places where you will find this kind of cell receptor. Next one is adipose tissue, fat cells, where when blood glucose level goes beyond certain level, because that we will discuss in the next slides, insulin is released. When insulin occupies the receptor over here, then what will happen? It initiates a cascade of events, ultimately leading to GLUT4 translocation. What do you mean by translocation? This is it. GLUT4 receptor, okay, so stays inside as GSV pool. Okay, so this is the pool where three proteins, they are joined together with cell membrane, okay, glycolipid type of thing, so that these vesicles are present inside the cell. The moment the receptor, insulin receptor is activated, then what will happen? They will move this from this pool, they will translocate, they will move towards cell membrane, they will attach to a tethering molecule. This is what we call it as a tethering molecule. Then it will be held together by the second tethering molecule. This is what we call it as docking. Then the protein will integrate with the cell membrane. The protein will be integrating with the cell membrane. Once this receptor is there, it takes in one glucose unit. The moment the glucose unit is taken up, the glucose unit is liberated inside. Once the insulin level is nullified, okay, once you have, okay, once the insulin receptor is free, means no insulin is there, then it will be taken inside via endocytosis. Means the receptor is almost like mobile receptor. Okay, whenever insulin receptor is occupied, then it will wake up immediately and then it will come back to cell membrane and it does its job, and then the moment insulin receptor is free, insulin is removed from the insulin receptor, then it will go back to its pool. Okay, so this is the way how GLUT4 receptor works. This is a little bit complicated receptor, but this is very important receptor as far as our glucose homeostasis is concerned. I hope it is clear to you. Okay. Now let's see how actually our blood glucose level is maintained. What is the normal blood glucose level for our body? As per WHO, the normal blood glucose level for us is 80 to 120. Okay, 80 to 120 means from here to here. In some of the books you will see like from 70 to 110 etc. But 80 to 120 is the actual range. So here normally our blood glucose level is maintained in this region. Why? Why do we need our blood glucose level to be maintained at all? Because you don't have any strict rules for other chemicals, but glucose is needed, because as you have seen, when insulin is there, the blood glucose level, the glucose that is there in your blood is sequestered into skeletal muscles and liver. But normally, for normal functioning of your brain, for your kidney, where there is no storage is there, they cannot store the energy. So that's the reason why they have to continuously take glucose from blood circulation for their function. For their optimal function, this is the region, means 120 milligram per deciliter to 80 milligram per deciliter. So this is the range that is sufficient for our optimal functioning. So that's why we have to maintain the blood glucose level at that time, at that range. So here, let's say our blood glucose level, let's say you had your lunch, okay? When lunch is over, the digestion part happens. This is your normal blood glucose, it is going on, and then because digestion will be over within 15 to 30 minutes, and then blood glucose level will increase like this. Okay, it should go on increasing, but after it reaching certain level, what will happen is, because your in 80 to 120, your blood glucose levels will be minimal, it will be most like this. And as the blood glucose level crosses 120, in fact, if it reaches 160, above 160, immediately insulin level will also increase. Okay, as the insulin level is increasing, because it will switch on reabsorption process, absorption process. So that's the reason why there will be steep fall. The blood glucose level will come down. As it is coming down, obviously insulin level will also come down, and it enters into normal range. It will go down sharply, and then it will happen like this. Okay, so in like this, it will maintain. So this is the way how insulin and blood glucose levels are related. Okay, because this in the beginning you are on the fasting level. Okay, because during fasting your blood glucose level will be close to 80, because if you are a healthy person, it will be close to 80. Then you are fed, okay, lunch, you have taken food, and then digestion is over in half an hour, and then you are going upwards. So here slowly it crosses optimal level, and it also crossed usually 160. But for a healthy human being, even before this one, you can see rise in glucose insulin level, and then as the glucose level is increasing, insulin secretion will also increase, and then at one moment, because it will start acting on skeletal muscles, so thereby blood glucose level will come down. As the blood glucose level is decreased, the insulin level will also decrease. Whereas after reaching some time, blood insulin level will reach minimal, so thereby blood glucose level is maintained like this. Okay. In another case, let's say when we have in a case where this one blood glucose level is going below certain level. Below certain level means what? Like you did not have your lunch and you are in a hurry, so you started watching my video right now, okay, then your blood glucose level will go down like this. Then what will happen? Okay, we have one more hormone, we call it as glucagon. Okay, so the glucagon level will be opposite to insulin. Okay, so when insulin levels are very high, glucagon levels will be very less. So glucagon will be over here because blood glucose level is minimal, so thereby glucagon will switch on its work so that gluconeogenesis is initiated. As the blood glucose level is falling below normal range, glucagon level will increase. Okay, as the glucagon level is increasing, gluconeogenesis is initiated, so thereby glucose level is brought up. Okay, it will pick up and then it will be maintained. So this glycogen level, because as it increases, glucagon level decreases. Okay, in case of normal unfed condition, it will go on like this. So if it goes below, then it will rise so that it will bring back glucose level again. This is the way how you will see the relation between glucose and glucagon. I hope you understood the relation. Okay, so I will summarize everything in one graph. Like in case of fed condition, okay, the blood glucose level increases. In response to that, the blood insulin level will increase, because glucagon is also there in our body. So that's the reason why when glucose level increases, glucagon level goes to minimal. But after some time, glucose level, because absorbed glucose is metabolized, so thereby it may get metabolized, so thereby glucose level decreases, and then insulin is normal, but glucagon level slowly it starts increasing. So this is the way how blood glucose level is maintained by glucagon and insulin. So they are highly responsive, very highly potent, and they control insulin dependent receptors present on skeletal muscles and the liver. Okay, so we will see further details in the coming lectures in glycolysis, etc. Okay, I hope you understood the subject. Okay, am I clear? So let's have some discussion at the end of the lecture. Post absorption events. After absorption, what will happen? With the help of insulin, glucose will be sequestered into liver and skeletal muscles. With the help of facilitated diffusion, glucose will be absorbed by brain, RBC, your cornea, nerve cells, kidney and capillaries and other tissues, okay, where a facilitated diffusion is there. Once all the glucose is packed into your body, then what will happen? The glucose metabolism, glycolysis, that we will see in the next class. Okay, so with this I will conclude my lecture. we'll see again in the next class in glucose metabolism or glycolysis. The first cycle in glucose metabolism, that is glycolysis. Okay.